Former Tokyo Electric Power Company executives and former Japanese Prime Minister Naoto Kan may be spared a court battle. Prosecutors are not likely to press criminal charges for their handling of the 2011 nuclear crisis at the Fukushima Daiichi plant. Fukushima residents had filed criminal complaints against TEPCO's former executives and government officials. They include former TEPCO chairman Tsunehisa Katsumata and then Prime Minister Kan. Prosecutors have been investigating whether they were able to predict in advance such a massive earthquake and tsunami. They concluded that the former Prime Minister and top management at TEPCO were not able to foresee the effects of such massive twin disasters.
We felt that putting our users in mortal danger for a quick buck was the right move.
The prosecutors concluded that they'll not press criminal charges for the actions of the utility and the government in the aftermath of their nuclear crisis.
Many people said Tokyo was the favorite going into the IOC vote. NHK World's Kyoko Fujita looks at the reasons why it beat out the two other candidate cities.
Japanese officials had a clear message for the IOC. Tokyo is safe, secure, and has the know-how to put on a world-class games.
Officials at the Tokyo Electric Power Company have warned of a potential new problem at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. They say radioactive water that leaked from a storage tank last month may have merged with groundwater.
A city blessed with world-class infrastructure and still investing to prove further.
The governor of Tokyo says it already has $4.5 billion set aside for the 2020 games. And that financial security was an advantage over rival city Madrid. Spain is still struggling from an economic crisis, and Olympic officials had doubts that it could afford to improve existing or build new facilities. Turkey's delegation stressed how having the games in Istanbul could help bring peace to a volatile region. But unrest there earlier this year, as well as a crisis in neighboring Syria, apparently had some IOC members worried about safety. That gave Tokyo extra points over its runoff rival, since it's one of the safest cities in the world.
Like it if you went to pick your flowers and were kneeling in radioactive waste. That's what's happening in Tokyo now.
You have described yourself as being a safe pair of hands. Now, as a surgeon, this is something that appeals to me even if I didn't vote myself.
But the Tokyo bid team did have to address one major issue: the radioactive water leaking at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe told the IOC there is no need to worry.
Let me assure you, the situation is under control. It has never done and will never do any damage to Tokyo.
I'd like to assure you that there is no risk like the one you might imagine in Tokyo.
Takeda said radiation levels in Tokyo are the same as those in any other city in the world.
And when I was in Tokyo, I took some samples. Now, I didn't look for the highest radiation spot. I just went around with 5 plastic bags, and when I found an area, I just scooped up some dirt and put it in the bag. One of those samples was from a crack in the sidewalk. Another one of those samples was from a children's playground that had been previously decontaminated. Another sample had come from some moss on the side of the road. Another sample came from the roof of an office building that I was at. And the last sample was right across the street from the main judicial center in downtown Tokyo. Well, I brought those samples back, declared them through customs, and sent them to the lab. And the lab determined that all of them would be qualified as radioactive waste here in the United States and would have to be shipped to Texas to be disposed of.
For the Japanese government recently admitted that some 300 tons of radioactive water have leaked into the ocean. Lisei Murata, a former Japanese ambassador to Switzerland, criticized the Japanese government and the operator of the crippled nuclear plant, Tokyo Electric Power Corporation, for its handling of the situation.
TEPCO recently admitted to leaks of radioactive water. The amount is much more that the simulation had taken into account.
The international community has also voiced concerns over the issue, but Tokyo, meanwhile, is busy drumming up support for its bid in hosting the 2020 Olympics.
2020 Tokyo, let's do well.
Murata stressed the fact that Japan does not realize the gravity of the issue is more outrageous.
If Japan can't secure the safety of its own nation, it is being insincere in hosting an international event like the Olympics. It should step down.
Japanese officials also stressed the country's track record, having successfully hosted one summer and two winter Olympics in the past. The pressure will now be on Tokyo to maintain that reputation.
The eyes of three nations were firmly fixed on Buenos Aires today. The leaders of Spain, Japan, and Turkey were there making their final pitch to host the Summer Olympics in 2020. The second the announcement was made, the triumphant city erupted in celebration. But as Arthi Pol explains, winning comes at a price.
Years of work comes down to just one moment.
Tokyo!
While victorious, Tokyo now gets set to welcome the world in 2020. Those who've worked on previous Olympic bids say just getting to this day is a steep climb.
I know how much work is involved. It's a ton of work just in terms of preparing. You've got to do it in multiple languages. You have to address multiple agendas that are going on. And there's a lot of behind-the-scenes politics.
Richardson led the team behind Toronto's failed bid for the 2008 Games. He says for the cities competing today, part of winning the bid is addressing domestic hurdles head-on, something all three cities did during their final presentations today. He says, I think that for Spain now and for the Spanish people who have gone through a really difficult time, they are starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. Spain suffers from a crippling 27% jobless rate. Economic uncertainty was part of the public concern over Madrid's bid. Spain was the first to be eliminated. Tokyo, the victorious city, was working against safety concerns over a persistent leak of radioactive water from the Fukushima nuclear plant damaged by the 2011 tsunami.
Let me assure you, the situation is under control.
And when I was in Tokyo, I took some samples. Now, I didn't look for the highest radiation spot. I just went around with 5 plastic bags, and when I found an area, I just scooped up some dirt and put it in the bag. One of those samples was from a crack in the sidewalk. Another one of those samples was from a children's playground that had been previously decontaminated. Another sample had come from some moss on the side of the road. Another sample came from the roof of an office building that I was at. And the last sample was right across the street from the main judicial center in downtown Tokyo. Well, I brought those samples back, declared them through customs, and sent them to the lab. And the lab determined that all of them would be qualified as radioactive waste here in the United States and would have to be shipped to Texas to be disposed of.
Meanwhile, Istanbul, the runner-up, has been at the center of widespread anti-government protests in the past few months, and the conflict in neighboring Syria has been going on for more than 2 years.
Turkey is doing its best to normalize the situation in Syria as soon as possible.
Ultimately, with the decision, there is always an element of mystery. The IOC never reveals the reasons behind a failed bid.
The Olympics is the best brand in the world, and it's the largest sporting event in the world. You can't afford to make a wrong decision when you're the IOC.
For the cities that do win, there's always an economic risk. After coming out on top to host in 2010, Vancouver undertook a massive plan over several years to expand its rapid transit system, and Vancouver poured millions into the city's infrastructure. Security costs alone for previous games are staggering. Those games in Vancouver, $1 billion. Before that, Beijing spent an estimated $6.5 billion. So after the glow of the gold is gone, a country can be left deep in the red. And as Japan prepares for the summer of 2020, part of that planning will include how to cope once the world leaves. Arti Paul, CBC News, Toronto.
For the Japanese government recently admitted that some 300 tons of radioactive water have leaked into the ocean. Misei Murata, a former Japanese ambassador to Switzerland, criticized the Japanese government and the operator of the crippled nuclear plant, Tokyo Electric Power Corporation, for its handling of the situation.
TEPCO recently admitted to leaks of radioactive water. The amount is much more than the simulation had taken into account.
The international community has also voiced concerns over the issue, but Tokyo, meanwhile, is busy drumming up support for its bid in hosting the 2020 Olympics.
2020 Tokyo, let's do well.
Murata stressed the fact that Japan does not realize the gravity of the issue is more outrageous.
If Japan can secure the safety of its own nation, it is being insincere in hosting an international event like the Olympics. It should step down.
Officials in Tokyo now have 7 years to prepare for the Games. NHK World's Mitsuko Nishikawa looks at some of the benefits the Olympics might bring and some of the potential challenges.
One of the features that Japanese bid officials promoted was Tokyo's compact plan. 28 of the sports venues will be located within 8 kilometers of the Olympic Village.
Fencing, taekwondo, and the IBC MPC.
The Games will be held over 17 days in July and August 2020. The Paralympics will follow for 13 days. Officials are expecting as many as 10 million visitors. Many people in Tokyo hope the Games will boost the economy by attracting more tourists and adding infrastructure investment. But the organizers face many challenges. One question, as always, is the budget. National and local officials say they've set aside enough money. But the real cost of hosting the Games remains unclear. Some experts are concerned about budget overruns. This could put an additional burden on taxpayers and divert resources from rebuilding communities and infrastructure affected by the 2011 disaster. Japanese authorities must also deal with the ongoing problems at the Fukushima nuclear plant. Its operator has been criticized for releasing information too slowly regarding the leak of contaminated water. And the roadmap for dismantling the damaged reactors is yet to be finalized. Japanese leaders are basking the glow of their Olympic victory. But the Games will invite both welcome attention and serious scrutiny from the Japanese public and from people around the world.
Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif says he will take the initiative in talks with Western nations on his country's nuclear development program. Zarif met former Japanese Foreign Minister Masahiko Komura in Tehran on Saturday. Zarif said President Hassan Rouhani on Friday appointed him to take charge of nuclear talks with 6 world powers, Germany and the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. The talks have been suspended since April. Komura urged Zarif to demonstrate flexibility and review the country's approach to the issue. He added if Iran promotes transparency and trust, it will benefit both the country and the international community. Komura is scheduled to meet President Rouhani on Sunday.